Welcome to The Source, where we combine the headlines with in-depth conversations with the newsmakers themselves. I'm Pinky Webb. As 2023 comes to a close, we look back at some of the biggest stories here and abroad. From political plot twists and maneuverings that hound the Marcos-Duterte alliance, people ask, is the Uniteam still united? Major shakeups in the House leadership and shifting of alliances. A surprise turnaround on the probe of the International Criminal Court on the Duterte's war on drugs. And Duterte's staunch critic, former Senator Leila de Lima, walks free from detention after almost 7 years. And let's go straight to the sources of the story. We have political analyst Froilan Calilong and political scientist Cleve Arguelles. Cleve and Froilan, welcome to The Source. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
It's so nice to actually have this opportunity to look back at the year that was. So let's start with this 1.5 years of the Marcos administration. I just want to find out, what were the successes for you?
The successes. I think we're dealing with the conflict in the West Philippine Sea issue now in a better position. I think we're very much well placed to develop a good strategy to defend our territory against territorial incursions by foreign powers, particularly Chinese aggression in the West Philippine Sea. So there were, like, I think when President Marcos was elected, we were still unsure, whether the previous administration's foreign policy direction, which is towards making friends with the aggressor, whether that would continue. So I think one of the key successes of this year is learning that this administration is really serious in protecting our national sovereignty and territory.
Would you say it's a complete turnaround?
It is. It is. Because I think many of the victories of the administration prior to the Duterte administration weren't really taken advantage of by the Duterte administration. And so those were wasted years, I think, in terms of this particular issue.
Okay. Professor Froilan, what about you?
Well, yeah, I also agree with that. That foreign policy, I think, is one of the strongest suits of the current administration. But in addition, I believe that the administration was also able to navigate us through the post-pandemic recovery. I think we have better economic imperatives right now. I mean, the inflation rate is somewhat managed already, although I would say that at the onset, it was not really very good. It's a bit shaky, but what's happening right now, I think, with the formation of a very good and formidable economic team, I think we're seeing some headways, particularly with the infrastructure. We have the Build More, and then of course there is this Mahardika Investment Fund, which was, of course, we are all optimistic about, and hopefully it will materialize. And of course we are seeing how the president also was able to steer us towards international recognition. I mean, for the many travels that he has gone through, many different places, I think I hope that there were a lot of investment pledges that really materialized. But more important than that, I think he was able to introduce or reintroduce our country's positioning in the global.
So you don't see anything wrong with all the president's trips where he has been criticized by some? No, to you, that is an advantage for the country.
Well, if you look at the cost-beneficial context of it, I would surmise that there were reports that there were jobs that were created, that the investment packages really materialized, and it really pumped the economy. Then I think it's okay. I think it's good. But insofar as what we're seeing right now, more than that, I think it's the public, the global perception about his and his presidency. Because you remember that every time he goes out, he actually talks about the not only the dynamics of Philippine politics, but of course the global arena, about what's happening in the West Philippine Sea, about climate change, all of these things.
Do you see him as a very active president, Cleve?
I think so like taking off from this conversation on the international trips that the president has taken, right? It's really good that he's our country now, after shying away from the world stage, is taking a place, right? We are a big country. We have so many Filipinos around the world. This is a very important stage for us, the world stage, right? But the jury is still out whether these international trips, right, will really be of benefit to many Filipinos. To be fair, these kinds of foreign trips and making foreign deals, like requests for foreign investments,
it takes time.
It takes time, right? So I think it's fairly reasonable to say that this is not really yet the time to talk about whether those trips will be beneficial. But on the other hand, I think it's the time to talk about whether, while the president was doing these trips, were he able to handle domestic issues, which is of course one of his primary duties.
Which is exactly where I wanted to go. There were times that the president was away and there was something happening here domestically. But the president always made it clear that that's the reason why I have these heads of departments. It's almost as if they're on autopilot. Parang meron ho siyang sinabi na to that effect. Okay, so we've talked about how he was quite successful, where you think he succeeded. Where should and which aspects should he work on next year? Professor, go ahead.
Well, I think for me, the agricultural department, I think, is still much to be desired. I think even if we already have in place a full-fledged cabinet secretary for the Department of Agriculture, I think I would agree with what the president has mentioned a long time ago, that this department has been long neglected, and I think there should be ample attention and really a great deal of focus and consideration insofar as funding is concerned, insofar as utilization of technology is concerned, in order to really pump prime the agricultural area. So, because you remember that this is really the backbone of our country. And so, I think the president should really look into this, and I hope that he was able to lay down a good foundation while he was at the helm of the agricultural department, so that when he finally left it to somebody, I mean, it's going to be on a steady path.
How about you? Where should he concentrate on?
Well, at least we're ending this year now with a full cabinet. We've waited for that for a long time.
Yeah,
I think this is one of the disappointments, right? Because the expectation is that if the house is not yet in order, maybe you should not be going out frequently, right? I think he should pay attention more to pressing domestic challenges. Foy has already talked about agriculture, and of course the prices of basic commodities is still a top issue for many Filipinos. But other than that, education is also a big concern and a big problem. And it's very important because this will be the legacy-defining contributions of this administration. Will it be able to solve these problems that will also set the future for the country? So agriculture and education, and we don't really see that much attention, if not appetite, from the president on these pressing challenges.
Okay, we need to take a very short break. This is The Source on CNN Philippines. Please stay tuned. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. I'm Pinky Webb. Our sources today, political analysts Froilan Calilong and Cleve Arguelles. I want to talk about politics. That's been in the news the past months. Confidential funds, former Deputy Speaker, Congresswoman Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, etc. Is Uniteam still in unity or not?
I think it's quite obvious now that the tensions have developed to a point that the bickering within the ruling coalition, within Uniteam, is now happening in the public arena. So I think the straightforward answer to that is that they're no longer as united as they want to appear in the public eyes, right? I think one of the surprising developments in politics this year is the rapid deterioration of the relationship within that Uniteam coalition. Of course, going into this administration, we knew that it's going to be challenging. It's a big coalition. There's lots of players inside, but we didn't realize that it's going to happen this soon, the deterioration in relationship, only because
Only because it's only been a year and a half.
Yes, and that, usually the president is able to keep his coalition intact until after the midterm elections.
Yeah.
And we're still years away from the midterm elections.
Right. What do you think happened here?
Yeah, there are actually fissures that we actually are feeling, and I think it's going to metamorphosize into something bigger cracks, I think in the long run. And I think this is evident primarily because the very foundations of the Uniteam was actually created by virtue of the elections itself. I mean, they did not really come from the same political party to begin with, so it's just a consolidation of the North and the South in order to really get the votes during the election. So I mean, the foundation, although we see them together in the campaign, and we see them after, they're very cordial to each other, and they seem to project a happy relationship. But of course, inside there are not just them, but there are people around them that may actually cause the divide.
So tell us, why is this happening?
I think it's also quite clear that this has something to do with 2028, or the political ambitions of those who are part of this alliance, but are also wishing to gain an advantage come 2028 presidential elections, right? I think the next thing for any vice president is to think of whether she should run for the presidency, right? We've seen this. This is classic in political history of the Philippines. The vice president is always a target by other members of the administration, right? That's why all eyes are on the vice president. And because once the vice president is no longer palatable as a potential presidential candidate, then other key players can come in, right? We also notice, for example, that the House Speaker, Martin Romualdez, is taking a very public role, right, in all these developments, right? So I think also that signals his interest in terms of like the 2028 ambitions. So what's really challenging for those in the Unity is temporarily setting aside these 2028 ambitions. But I think this is very difficult for them to do because there is no strong opposition that threatens them, and therefore their eyes are focused on
each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's also one of the things that made this Uniteam coalition possible. It's because I think when before the 2022 presidential elections, they were also concerned, right, about the possible victory by the opposition. Now that's not a concern.
It isn't.
Yeah.
For now. How important is it, and do you think that there's a chance that the relationship will improve?
Well, at this point in time, if we are to judge the political history of our country, most often than not, relationships that turn sour do not revert back to what it used to be. So I think I'm seeing, especially with 2025 around, and of course all eyes on 2028, it's going to go down the drain. But of course, as Filipinos, we don't want this to happen. We don't want to see this because we believe and we banked on the idea of unity, and it's quite unfortunate for us to also see the two top leaders of the country quite disintegrating at this point.
But right now, would you say, just very quickly, that especially with the former president, Rodrigo Duterte, coming into the picture and even saying that baka mapilitan pa akong tumakbo, are the Dutertes a force to reckon with right now? What is your short answer to that?
I think yes. I think they really enjoy popular support, and I think the Dutertes know, especially the former president, that's really a key advantage for them, that they enjoy wide public support, and they can always leverage that in terms of their relationship in the coalition, but also across the political spectrum.
Yes, I believe. We need to understand also that President Duterte is enjoying still the full support of Amy Marcos, Senator Amy Marcos. So that's one. And another thing, of course, is wherever you go right now and you see President Rodrigo Duterte, he still maintained that rockstar appeal. So I think he is still a force to reckon with. Although we need to understand also that the PDP Laban has suffered a great deal of decimation over the past few months. There are a lot of members of PDP Laban. Some of them are even stalwart members that have already moved over to Lakas.
Right.
So I think this will create some kind of problem also for him.
Let's talk about the recent development, Chacha. Were you surprised that the House had made mention that during the break this is something they will study and in fact might be ready before the President's State of the Nation address in July?
Honestly, very surprising. Yeah, considering the fact that this was not even a part of the agenda at the get-go. And although I think there were some personalities that merged or that joined Lakas. For instance, Deputy Speaker Dong Gonzales, who used to be with PDP, is a staunch supporter of the Chacha. So I think it could be possible that he is, advancing this to and telling this, of course, to the House Speaker, and that's why it's gaining momentum. I'm not saying that this is something new. I mean, this has already been talked about in the Senate. I think Senator Robin Hood Padilla has been championing it. Even in the House, there were instances that I personally was invited as a resource person for this, but it did not really gain traction. But right now, I believe it might because the House Speaker leadership is actually very vocal about it.
Yeah. I guess as a last question, Glebe, do you think that talks of Chacha could possibly make or break certain personalities that are pushing for it?
It can definitely do that. I think if there's something to be learned about recent Philippine politics, is that Chacha is a hard thing to sell to the Filipino people. They may want, they want changes in the government and in how we run our country, but there is always very low appetite for changing the constitution. So this may be a mistake on the part of those pushing Chacha, in the sense that this is actually something that it's like a deja vu. We've seen this over and over. A House Speaker will be able to consolidate political support in the House and mistake that as something that he could take advantage of and do something as grand as a charter change. I hope that's not the case this time.
All right. Thank you both for sharing with us your insights. Political analyst Froilan Calilong and political scientist Cleve Arguelles. We'll be taking a short break. This is The Source on CNN Philippines. Please stay tuned. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. I'm Pinky Webb. President Bongbong Marcos stands firm on the Philippine position that the country will not surrender an inch of our territory to any foreign power amid increasing aggressions in the West Philippine Sea. Over 130 diplomatic protests have been filed against China over its dangerous and provocative actions in the West Philippine Sea. Is the government's transparency initiative working in our favor? Let's go straight to the source of the story. We have international relations expert Chester Cabaza. Chester, good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Live?
Live, finally.
Finally, we get to speak to each other face to face.
Right.
How would you describe, I guess we're going to have to start with that, Philippine-China relations right now?
Well, of course, it's a different China-Philippines relationship that we've seen under the Marcos administration than during the past administration. But if you try to look at it, I think the defining moment right now is that we have robust alliance and strategic partnerships during the time of President Marcos with the U.S. and now with Australia, Singapore, Australia, Vietnam, Japan, and soon with France.
Yeah.
So I think these are new changes. But the magic here is that we were able to consolidate. And I think this is the best time to talk now to China, because during the time of President Duterte, there was no major country backing us because we blocked them. But this time around, it's exciting because we have expanded our strategic relationships and, of course, our alliance with the United States.
You said that it's exciting, but could it possibly bring about instability?
Oh, well, of course, I have to look at it as a rational strategy where you have deterrence as a part of that collective deterrence coming from our partners and allies. But yeah, instability because there is miscommunication coming from Beijing and the Philippines. They have different narratives, which I think this is something that we have to of course, put into the floor also, that we have to listen also to Beijing's narrative now, given that I think our alliance and strategic partnership is very strong right now.
What do you mean by having to listen to China's narrative?
Okay, because right now the military is saying that there is cognitive warfare. Meaning to say that there are different narratives through disinformation, and of course right now China's concern is their own sentiments. They listen to their own people. And same as true with the Philippines, we listen to our own sentiments. So given that disconnect and language barrier, as we call it, I think this is the best time to have that dialogue now with China, so that at least we can convey to them what do we want, what would be our perceptions, because I haven't seen yet a dialogue between Manila and Beijing where they discuss about the 2016 Hague ruling. What we know only over the press is that China dislodges the Hague ruling, and then the Philippines insists about it. So that's only those are the only things that we heard about it.
But would it possibly be difficult to discuss the ruling because of their non-participation and that it is something they do not recognize? So in terms of having a dialogue and going back to speaking, how could that actually happen? Paano kaya? I do recall Chinese ambassador to the Philippines, Wang Jilian, saying that it's time for Manila and Beijing to speak again. But how do you see this actually happening?
Well, of course, there is a proposal right now to, of course, dislodge the ambassador and, of course, recall him. But I think the best way for that is to have bilateral talks with China by of course by having different mechanisms. We can do that through track 1.5 or track 2 diplomacy, through scholars and the military, and then of course you have diplomats also. We can also do back channeling, which we did in the past.
Right.
And recently our president went to Beijing last January, and then he had a talk with President Xi.
Which they were saying that they agreed that they will lower the temperature, hindi ba?
That's the intention, but it seems like what happened, of course, there's a loss of translation. So I guess what they should be doing is that, of course, let's continue to have multiple views and engagements with them.
Apart from that, how else do you think this issue, maybe the word is not be resolved, but just to lower the tension between the two countries, apart from dialogue, is there any other direction that the Philippines should take?
Okay, I would suggest the people-to-cultural engagements. I think that is one dimension that we have to look at. I think the other one would be the economic dimension, because recently we canceled infrastructure projects with China, and now you have Japan and European countries, including our local elites, of course, doing their best to replicate what China has offered to us in the past. So we have to expand it, because of course, like say for example, Kuala Lumpur is saying that we are very combative to Beijing. Singapore is saying that the Philippines is endangering its trade and business relations with China. So we have to listen also to our neighbors.
International relations expert Chester Cabaza. Thank you, Chester, for your time.
Thank you very much.
And good to see you again.
All right.
And thank you for joining us here on The Source. I'm Pinky Webb. You're watching CNN Philippines.